Welcome to the presentation on Renewable Assessments and Learning Legacies, developing the OER and OER project across school years. My name is Vanessa, and I'm presenting on behalf of my colleagues Jiyae, Yasin, who you'll also hear later in this presentation, and Melissa. Introduction. In this session, we'll discuss how to engage students with the 5 R's of Open by showing how renewable assessments can be designed and used across multiple years of a course. In order to meet these objectives, we'll be presenting about the OER on OER project, a project in which students learn to create open educational resources. In this project, students were working to develop open educational resources that would help educate others about how to design, develop, and use OER. The project was situated in a graduate-level course, and our presentation spans the first 3 offerings of this course between Spring 2020 and Spring 2023. The image that you see on this screen was used on social media by students in the Spring 2020 course to help promote the project and to share the OER that they created. Renewable assessments and course legacies are the key concepts related to our project. Renewable assessments are assignments that have meaning beyond a grade in a class. They result in student-generated artifacts that may be shared and openly licensed so that other people will see them and make meaningful use of them. Conceptually, it's easiest to understand renewable assessments if you contrast them with disposable assessments. We all have a lot of experience with disposable assessments. Think about the papers you've written for classes. You probably wrote those papers, submitted them to your instructor, who was the only person who read them, and after the grade was assigned, you were free to toss the papers in the trash bin. Those assessments were disposable. Once they were graded, they had no greater purpose. However, a renewable assessment continues to have life beyond grading. Course legacies are artifacts handed down in a course. Students in one class leave artifacts to be used by students in the next class. It is an intentional process. Students are aware and purposefully create that legacy to leave behind. A great example of course legacies, and where I initially learned about the concept, comes from the Star Legacy project. On that project, students left tips and ideas within a computer-based program to help students who would come along after them. When we use renewable assessments and course legacies together, we find that the renewable assessments become those legacy artifacts for the next class. When this occurs in a design environment, some pretty interesting things happen. When those legacy artifacts become artifacts that the next class builds on and not just learns from, students must engage with the 5 R's of Open and need to consider that even things that they create from scratch may be used by other people in ways they didn't initially think about. Students find that their beliefs about creation and authorship quite naturally get challenged because they don't know exactly how the next group of students are going to use what they've created. That encourages them to design with the idea of joint authorship, knowing that what they create will feel complete to them, but may be added to or changed by future students or people in the world at large. This idea of distributed joint authorship and the loss of control that comes with it can create a little bit of discomfort for students, but it's a worthwhile thing for them to work through and really helps them get into the spirit of open educational resources. The inspiration for the course that hosts the OER on OER project came from an identified need and a prior special topics course. The faculty in the Instructional Systems and Learning Technologies program at Florida State University identified the need for a new course to formally incorporate open learning and OER into the curriculum, and not just squeeze the topics into other courses. The learners for this new course were the master's students in the program, as well as graduate certificate students. Not only would the new course introduce students to open learning and OER, but it would also be an advanced course for practicing instructional design and development skills. With that in mind, we're very much focused on engaging students in authentic instructional design projects. We recognize multiple benefits. Students who have taken courses in instructional design and development now have an authentic space to practice those skills with a service learning component. They know that whatever they create in this class will benefit others. The work they do can contribute to their capstone portfolios, which are a graduation requirement, and students who want to develop leadership and project management skills may assume those positions in the course. Students also can build their professional networks as they share and discuss their project beyond the course. A prior special topics course served as the inspiration for the course structure. In 2014, I taught a course about MOOCs and open learning at the request of students who wanted to learn about this trend. In the course, we developed and taught our own MOOC, with all of the students working as the designers and then the TAs for the MOOC. This screen shows part of the syllabus for the MOOC. Jiyae was the lead assistant for that course, and my students were listed as the TAs for the MOOC. That MOOC project followed a course within a course timeline, where we spent the first half of the semester learning foundational content and doing the design and development work on the MOOC. Next, we finished the preparations, polished our materials, and promoted the MOOC project. Finally, during weeks 12 through 15, we taught the MOOC, and in the last week of our course, we debriefed the overall experience. In the MOOC course, we effectively created renewable assessments, but we didn't have a term for what we were doing. The MOOC was taught to authentic learners, components of the MOOC were reused in other classes, and the MOOC artifacts were shared online for anybody who cared to use them. I personally continue to use some of the artifacts from the MOOC in my other classes.
EME 5250 Open Learning and Open Educational Resources. EME 5250 addresses the historical and social context of open learning and open educational resources and engages students directly in the design, development, and implementation of open learning experiences and resources. Major topics of the course include history and definitions of open learning and open educational resources, design and development of open learning systems and OER, implementation and evaluation of open learning systems and OER, authorship and ownership in open learning and OER, and ethics in open learning and OER. EME 5250 includes the following assessments. OER critique. This is an evaluative critique of the content and design of 2-3 open textbooks, open learning resources, or open courses. OER design and development. This is a group assignment to develop and share a set of OER, including lesson plans, materials, and assessments for an instructional unit. Reusable assignment or research brief. This assignment requires the development of a reusable assignment or a research brief focusing on some aspect of open learning or OERs. Canvas was used as a learning management system of the course. Weekly modules were created and all readings, tasks, and content were included in these modules. The course included discussion activities that enabled students to apply their learning to open learning and OER practices. The weekly course schedule on the right-hand side shows the topics and assignments in the course.
There are 3 iterations of this course that we would like to share with you. In spring 2020, I taught this course with Jiyae as the teaching assistant and 23 students. During this initial offering of the course, our major accomplishment was to choose and develop the topic of OER on OER, set the initial design standards, and create the hosting website. We made many decisions about the format of the project. You can see a screenshot here from the initial version of that OER on OER website. The experience was not without its challenges. We effectively had a blank slate. We had all of the design decisions in the world to make, and that can be challenging and paralyzing in its own way. It was daunting to recognize that there was so much that could be done on this topic, and we were only going to be able to do a small portion. We also had the challenge of the COVID-19 pandemic. This was the semester that everyone shifted swiftly to remote learning. My class was online with no change in modality, but many students worked as learning professionals with jobs that rapidly changed and pivoted online. Our planned soft launch at an in-person event was canceled. We used this challenge as motivation and opportunity, seeking different ways to share our creation, and with students now creating and sharing with and for their colleagues who were also pivoting online. At the end of spring 2020, the legacy we left behind was an incomplete puzzle. We had cherry-picked topics that students wanted to develop instruction about, but it was by no means a comprehensive overview of open educational resources.
2 years after the first offering of the course, EME 5250 was offered again and was taken by 23 graduate students in spring 2022. There were 2 options for the major course project. The first one was to choose a blank slate again and begin developing from scratch. The second option was to build upon what was developed 2 years ago by veteran students. Continuing the legacy was the option that the class decided, and we were able to further improve on the OER on OER project by expanding on existing content and integrating new content, engaging in the 5 R's of OER at the same time. Major accomplishments from this decision were to significantly expand on the existing content of the OER on OER project and successfully use the framework developed by veteran students. Major challenges were deciding on which part of the OER needed revision and/or improvement, and students' under-evaluation of their knowledge and skills on the chosen topic. Yet again, it was time to decide whether to continue the legacy or start from a blank slate. The decision was to further find the missing pieces of the puzzle.
In the spring 2023 course, Melissa taught 16 students. Her major accomplishments were focused on developing specialized materials, such as information about how OER could be used in specific disciplines and professions. With her students, there were many conversations about sustainable design. By that we mean, how does this project actually live on? How does one handle broken links or outdated content? Do the new designers come on and design new items, or do they revise old items? Do they make choices about deleting old items? They were also focused on communication elements, such as how people would be able to get in touch with the design team moving forward. The students in this class also had to deal with a lot of OER that had already been designed and put on a website. They had to make sense of it and work to organize it in new ways. They had to figure out how their work fit into this larger piece.
A number of tools and skills were needed and used by the instructors and students to bring the OER on OER project to life. Google Drive was used as the main storage location for all materials. Students were given access to specific folders in a main Google Drive folder that was owned and managed by the instructor. These procedures brought the need for some project management on the part of the instructors, as they had to regulate and update access to these folders and monitor contributions. Students also used tools and platforms such as YouTube, Articulate Storyline, Adobe Captivate, and Canva to design and develop OERs. The major hosting platform of the course was Google Sites, as it allowed content uploaders to work collaboratively and real-time and provided relatively intuitive interface. Students used social media groups and posts to distribute the project, and distribution success was assessed using Google Analytics. Students mainly referred to skills such as instructional design, online learning, project management, effective communication and collaboration, open pedagogy, design and development, and consultation. Throughout the course of the project, students were engaged in retaining, reusing, revising, remixing, and redistributing OERs. Since all students were creators, they revised, remixed, and redistributed existing OER. While the first-year students practiced the skills on OER they found online, students in the later iterations of the course also had the chance to practice 5 R's on OER developed by their peers in previous years. Types and examples of OER developed. Students designed and developed OER such as images, infographics, videos, and podcasts. In addition to compiled resources, students also delivered editable resources for future students or other internet users to retain, revise, and remix. These editable resources included image files, written scripts, slideshows, and audio recordings. On this slide, you'll see some examples of OER that were developed and uploaded to the OER hosting website by students. These examples include sitemaps and infographics, links to editable resources, and visuals.
Now I'd like to share a little bit about the design process that we use in this course, which may be helpful for others who wish to emulate the course. We would be happy to share any of our course materials with anybody who's interested. All you need to do is ask. We used an ongoing iterative design process, never strictly moving from one phase to the next, and always returning to prior phases as needed. The phases are displayed here linearly just because that's the easiest way to explain them. We started with a plan, thinking about content and format, and forming design teams. Then we designed and developed, focused not only on OER, but also design standards and the hosting website. We then went through a quality assurance process with internal feedback and revision, followed by a soft launch to get formative feedback from people outside the course. Finally, we launched the project, sharing it in various venues, just like we're sharing it with you here today. We concluded each class experience with reflection, evaluating our projects and our experiences, and thinking about how we are practitioners who develop, share, and use OER. Finally, there's always a concern with maintenance because the OER lives on. An important part of the design approach is the students. They operate as a design collective where everyone authors, reviews, and shares. During the first iteration, when we were talking about authorship, we had a really interesting conversation about whether it was important for everybody to have their names on the work that they specifically had created, and what that would mean in terms of ongoing licensing, sharing, and updating. Ultimately, the students concluded that they didn't need to have individual authorship of pieces, but rather it was important to them that we claim collective authorship as a group. One of the students created this graphic to help represent the group. Throughout the design process, instructor support was critical. The instructor helps set the topic for the project and suggests the subtopics. The instructor provides structure for the phases of the project and keeps students moving forward. The instructor coordinates volunteers for support tasks such as website development and continuously monitors student progress. We've learned a lot through this class and through sharing our experiences as the instructors. Project management has proven to be a critical skill for the large-scale design projects like this, particularly when the project is a renewable assessment with an authentic external audience. This audience motivates students, who then must be held to a high standard. As a project manager, you quickly learn that everything will take more time than you expect, and building in those cycles for a revision is important. Not everybody in the class will end up contributing equally. This, of course, is true of every class. Not every student puts equal effort into it. There were students who went above and beyond, and there were students who did the minimum amount of work to earn their grade. In the end, all students were credited equally, and all were part of the team. Some chose to lead, and others were followers. And this was not always reflected in their grades, and that was okay. Students recognized that what they got out of the course reflected what they put into the course, and it was about more than just a grade. It was about the skills that they developed, and about knowing that what they created could be used by and built upon by others. We also learned that legacy projects have natural phases. We all had different experiences of teaching the course. The first iteration was the blank slate version, where we were challenged to figure out what to develop. The next phase focused on expanding the concept, but at some point the large gaps were filled and the challenge became identifying the little gaps and specializing within the content. Now we find ourselves asking if we've reached the next phase, where it's time to sunset this particular project and start a new project in the next offering of the course. That doesn't mean that the OER on OER project doesn't live on. It remains a legacy that students in future iterations of the course will learn from and perhaps maintain. As we conclude our presentation, we'd like to summarize what we've covered and share some of our vision for the future. We believe strongly that renewable assessments are not to be used in every class, but are a great way to assess students working on learning objectives for higher order skills. When we use collaborative renewable assessments, we've seen that students are really pushed to work together with a high standard. It's the effect of joint authorship and authentic audience. Legacies make students recognize that their work is not done, but lives on to be used by others. When trying to teach within the spirit of the 5 R's, using this legacy approach and not just a general renewable assessment approach really helps bring the point home to students, that OER is about more than just creating something and sharing it with the world, but rather about being a part of an ongoing cycle of collaborative creation, sharing, and use. When work is done as a course legacy and students know that future students will use and build on what they've created, the idea of OER becomes concrete. Our vision for the future of this course is to build in a permanent place for discussing sustainability. We've also had the idea to build in legacy notes from one class to the next. With legacy notes, students would not just leave behind the learning objects that they've created, but also initiate a dialogue about their design process and where they see the opportunities for future development. Future classes can then pick up this dialogue. Finally, as we think about sunsetting the OER on OER project, we're also thinking about how to seek partnerships for authentic development in future versions of the course. We thank you for watching our presentation, and we would be happy to connect with you. Please feel free to connect through the conference platform or to email us, and also to check out the OER on OER website.